Thank you very much, John, and those relevant use cases. I think that was a very informative session. But next we have Ruben Heck. He's a project lead of digital identity at ConsenSys. Ruben.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to talk about identity, and identity is such a broad topic, so I will focus on one or few use cases and talk about digital identity in particular. So all of you are using digital services, I assume, so everybody has like multiple accounts, dozens of accounts, and every time you create a new account, you have some form of new identity. You have username and passwords all over the place, and every time you enter more and more data into the services, there you build maybe a reputation. So you use your Airbnb, you use eBay, and everywhere with every transactions you're building a reputation. But all of this data is siloed with the companies. It is there and you cannot really move it away. And that's one of the big challenges. The other challenge is that you have more and more services. Now you create more and more accounts and you kind of lose your accounts, and I don't know how many passwords you guys have, or maybe just one. That's also one alternative. And it's really, really hard. So what people start doing is they're using services like Facebook and Google and others to connect to the services. So connect to Facebook, that's awesome. It's really, really user-friendly. But what you do, every time you do this, you give them the information who you're interacting with. So every service you use and when you use it and how often you use it. And so what we do, we basically give more and more information to third parties who actually monetize this. Their business is like 90% of their money is by selling this information in some form to the market. So it's a really, really interesting challenge. And now we have more and more businesses and people want to do more e-government and banks and other, and you go through the process, but you cannot really use Facebook for this because they're not quite like the trusted entities to have a full KYC methodology. So you go through, every time you open a bank account or telco, you go and take a photo of your ID card, you take a photo of your utility bill, you upload it. It's a pain for everybody as well as for the companies because they store this data now. And we believe this is not really a scalable topic anymore, so we cannot really continue with this way. And we have now, the way we think about this is a paradigm shift to get the user in the center and have a self-sovereign identity solution where the user holds the data and the identity and the control about all of this together. And that's kind of where the blockchain comes in. Blockchain allows us now that people can use a blockchain to register an identity and hold a piece of information, which is a private key, to prove that they are in control of this identity. And that's kind of the really fundamental shift in the way to do this, because now it's not anymore that centralized systems have all this data which can get hacked and so on, and I guess it's a big topic. So with self-sovereign identity, what we can create now is the same user experience. You go somewhere, you connect with one click, and you're on the system, and nobody else gathers this information besides you. I think that's already like a big step. The second part is building portable reputation. So now that you have an identity which is not anymore created on each of the services, it's also not like one issued from one company, it is your identity. Now you can start using services and you get confirmation that you're a good actor, that you have paid back your loan, that you have been a good host on your Airbnb of the future. All these information are things where you build your reputation. And it's a portable reputation because you control it. You control the data. You can go anywhere now. And therefore, you create a much, much better marketplace. So you're not stuck in, oh, I've done now 100 things on eBay. I cannot really move away because that's where I'm known. So it will create a much, much more fluid ability for you to use the services which provide the best value, not because they were first or somewhere in there. The third thing is using an identifier which everybody can verify and see on the blockchain. We can build something which we call attestations. So people in this ecosystem or in the business can now start issuing information to you, data, and confirm and attest that you are what you claim to be. So for example, you go to your bank and they can attest, I'm older than 18, I have more than $10,000, and I don't know, I live in New York City. So these kind of information my bank knows because I'm interacting with my bank on a regular basis. So they are a really strong attestation provider. But it can be the same thing with the government. It can be anyone. It can be even peer-to-peers. It can be the university can attest that I have an MBA at a certain university. And it's not anymore that I can just make this up on LinkedIn. I basically can prove now with this attestation that my identity is the one where this university have issued this to. And it's not anymore in form of a PDF or like a piece of paper which I need to scan and then notarize and give to someone. I have this immediately as an attested, confirmed and signed piece of information which I can forward to anyone. That's kind of will give a lot of like opportunities in with more digital businesses. The other point is, now for businesses, I'll give you one example. Was a shop, like you go to an online shop, you have never been on that shop before, you go and you do your shopping and you click on purchase. Until this point, you don't need to give them anything. But then when you click on purchase, you would say, okay, now I need to give you my address and my credit card number, all this personal information about myself. And the shops typically want to make this very user-friendly, so they store it, that it's a one-click experience. So what we are now able to do with this technology is that you go in and you get the same one-click user experience, and we can go even one step further. So the data with your address, for example, does the shop really need to know who I am and where I live? Or does it just FedEx and UPS need to know? So what we can do is now we can encrypt this piece of data, this verified attestation of my address, but not against the keys from the shop, but against FedEx and UPS. So the shop can now decide, okay, I send it with FedEx. So they give this package to FedEx with this token, with this attestation. And so FedEx can now decrypt my address. They don't know what's in the package. And then they can deliver to me. And the same happens with the payment. So in this way, you completely separate who needs to really know something. And if the shop really needs to know that I'm older than 21, I can do this and I can prove this digitally without even any further knowledge about this. And they can just run this. And the great thing now is for the shop or for any other business and maybe even government services, they don't need to store this information. They can trust because it's verified. They can validate on the blockchain that I'm the person who I claim to be, and they don't need to store it. And that's a massive improvement to the risk people have. They store all these data, and like all these hacks are coming like more and more, and you hear it obviously in the news. A centralized place where you store all kind of personal information is a target for hacking. It's not a matter of whether it happens, like when does it happen. So if we can remove this, it removes a lot of liabilities for these kind of companies and businesses. And they can actually focus on the core. So at ConsenSys, we're building a self-sovereign identity platform which is called Uport, and we use the Ethereum blockchain for two major elements. First, to register your identity, and the second thing, and that's very key, for your key management. Key management is one of these things in this blockchain space people are talking about, but it's kind of, we will need to solve this at some point. Keys are really, really important for every transaction you do on the blockchain. And what we have built is a logic that you can replace this. At the moment you can call Facebook or anyone else like your provider of like, hey, I lost my password, can you please help me? In this world we are building now, this doesn't exist. But the logic to replace a key, or if you lost your phone, how do you do this? We build logic into the blockchain, so it's independent. It's not us controlling it. It's not our company. We just built the software, and anyone who can verify that the software and this code is right can then trust on this. And I think that's the key point. So the second element, so that's all about the self-sovereign identity and the data part. The second part, which is very important, is how do you interact with blockchains? And we're building basically a browser for interacting with blockchains, where you need to understand what you're actually doing, what you're about to sign with your key, and that's what we do. So that's kind of where we are today, and we're talking to a lot of different governments and other entities already who have various ideas, whether it is a city who wants to provide some e-government services and wants to issue an attestation that you go to the office, the registration office, and you confirm that you're actually a citizen there. They issue an attestation to you. So the next time you can go, you just need to provide the attestation. They don't need to worry about key management and like password resets and hotline calls and other things. It is something the user takes care of anyway. We also talk about with other governments about like notarizing. So you go in and you sign something because you have a key now. And you can do this now with multiple people can notarize something. Or think about smart cities. a lot of the use cases where IoT devices, like how do you interact, like how do you know this other person who is like who they claim to be? There's a lot of like these kind of use cases where keys and identity is a crucial part. Everything around blockchain is like extremely important. When you think about aid distribution, whether it's welfare, food stamps, whatever, there's so much possibility for fraud. If you can avoid that, people get this very strong identity associated with yourself, you can avoid a lot of these costs and fraud in that space. And that's, I think, a huge opportunity as well for governments to save a lot of money and make it much more user-friendly. We work as well with ID 2020 and others to target like refugee and other use cases, but you don't even need to look that far. Like a hurricane, you might lose everything. You might lose your, documents. If you can just go and get a new phone, and you go and recover your identity, and you have associated your information to that, that's so powerful, and you don't need to look that far away from it. So that's kind of the bigger picture. We're working, this is obviously something a small startup cannot solve them by themselves. We're working with a lot of other startups on standards. How do we make this as compatible as possible? And not only some startups, but also big companies, Microsoft and Accenture and like many others have joined this decentralized identity foundation. So we built something truly open. So everything is open source, what we contribute there, that is not something which a company owns. This needs to be something for the planet, basically, that everybody can use, because otherwise there's no trust. And with that, I hope you have it soon.